Stories are the most powerful thing on earth. They are literally life and death. Wars are waged based on the story of who is the hero and who is the villain. You are the result of a story your parents told each other, the one-night stand, the soulmate, and friends who became so much more. Life and death. So wouldn't you like to understand them better, these stories? How Story Works, an elegant guide to the craft of storytelling by Lani Diane Rich, demystifies stories and helps you understand why you love what you love, why you hate what you hate, and why prologues are almost always a bad idea. How Story Works by Lani Diane Rich. Available on Amazon in ebook, audiobook, and paperback form. Get your copy today.
Welcome to Still Pretty, a Buffy the Vampire Slayer podcast from Chipperish Media. I'm a veal kind of film scholar, Noelle LaCroix.
And I'm story expert and third unmeshable thing, Lani Diane Rich. And we're here today to talk about School Hard, the Spike episode of Season 2. I mean, the third episode of Season 2.
School Hard aired on September 29th, 1997, and was written by Joss Whedon and David Greenwald, and directed by John T. Kretschmer, who directed The Harvest for Season 1. This is the last episode of Buffy that Kretschmer will direct, and it's really too bad because there are some really strong directorial choices in this episode.
Yeah, he's really good. And if you're a Kretschmer fan, you could definitely check out Veronica Mars. He does a lot of episodes of Veronica Mars, so I know his name from that. And I'm always surprised when I see on Buffy he's only done a couple of episodes because I'm so familiar with him. I always assume it's from Buffy, but it's from Veronica Mars. So you could check out his work there. A heads up before we begin, at any point on Still Pretty, we may talk about anything that happens in the whole run of the show. And as such, this episode, this podcast is fully spoiled. You're too old to eat, but not to kill, so let's go on patrol. In School Hard, Principal Snyder assigns Buffy and another troublemaker named Sheila with the task of organizing parent-teacher night. Meanwhile, a new vampire named Spike comes to town, and it looks like he plans to stay a while.
Home sweet home.
Spike and his paramour, the beautiful but sickly Drusilla, crash the Anointed One's party as they prep for the vampire holiday, the night of St. Vigius. Spike promises to kill the Slayer for him. Meanwhile, Buffy and Joyce have a heart-to-heart in which Joyce guilts her for her bad behavior.
What I don't want is to be disappointed in you again.
Well, that's the last thing that I want, too. I'm trying. I really am. I have a lot of pressure on me right now.
Wait till you get a job.
I have a job.
At school, Sheila's a no-show for the parent-teacher organizing, and Giles and Jenny discover that the vampires will be surely planning some mischief for the night of St. Vigius. That night at the Bronze, Spike stalks Buffy and then confronts her after she slays a vampire in the alley.
Nice work, love.
Who are you?
You'll find out on Saturday.
Happens on Saturday.
I kill you.
Spike kidnaps Sheila and delivers her to Drusilla, who feeds to keep up her strength. While everyone tries to figure out who the new player in town is, Angel shows up to tell them that he's a bad, bad vampire. Buffy has other problems, though, and as parent-teacher night is upon them, she tasks Willow with keeping Joyce away from her teachers. Unfortunately, Snyder gets to Joyce, and just as she's about to take Buffy home, a horde of vampires descend upon the school.
What can I say? Good Mike.
The vampires attack and everyone runs to hide. With Joyce somewhat safe in the barricaded science room, Buffy goes through the ceiling to get to the library where she can get weapons. She tasks Giles with making sure Joyce gets out safely if she doesn't make it, and then leaves to take on the vamps, one of which turns out to be Sheila. Buffy takes Sheila out and then faces Spike.
I'll tell you what. As a personal favor from me to you, I'll make it quick. It won't hurt a bit.
No, Spike. It's gonna hurt a lot.
In the science room, a teacher and Snyder try to climb out through the window over Joyce's objections. The teacher gets killed. Joyce watches through a hole in the door as Buffy fights, but she can't see much. When Spike gets the jump on Buffy, Joyce comes out swinging with an axe.
You get the hell away from my daughter.
Faced with an angry mother, Spike and the remaining vampires run off. Snyder and the police decide to tell the media that it was a gang on PCP, but it's clear they know the truth. Buffy and Joyce leave, and Joyce tells Buffy that she's proud of her.
I have a daughter who can take care of herself, who's brave and resourceful and thinks of others in a crisis.
Back at the warehouse, Spike and Drusilla take over, and their first order of business is to eliminate the kid.
From now on, we're going to have a little less ritual and a little more fun around here.
All right, Noelle. So this is kind of an interesting and fun episode, right?
It really is. It really, really is. And I know you are quite partial to this one, so I want to hear all about your take on Spike Hard. School Hard.
Oh, Spike Hard, right?
Spike
yes,
Hard.
Absolutely. Well, we're gonna get to that. I want to save the dessert. So
Fair enough.
fair enough. So let's go ahead, I think, maybe and start the conversation by talking about this idea of the bad girl, right? Because we have this character in Sheila, who is a bad girl. And Buffy gets lumped together with her because Buffy burned down a school building,
Yeah.
twice or whatever. But it might have been smoking mice. So
Right.
that's okay. And so she ends up with Sheila, and being put in that category with Sheila, she says, that's what my mom sees when she looks at me, as Sheila. So we have Sheila, who is this kind of like categorically classic bad girl, right?
She's almost
She
a caricature of a
misbehaves.
bad girl.
She is absolutely a caricature of a bad girl. She's always drunk. She misbehaves. She's going out, getting drunk, hitting on random men and then random vampires.
Right.
Spike doesn't even need to kidnap her. He just says a couple of words to her and she's like, hey, wait up. And she follows him, right?
Yeah.
So we've built this kind of this stereotype of the woman who deserves what she gets, right? For getting drunk, right? Which when boys do it is cute and adorable, right?
Yeah.
For being, attracted to men and being presented as promiscuous, which really just means in charge of her own sexuality, right? Yes, she has a responsibility to help Buffy with the thing. She completely bails on that. Like, I'm not saying that she is a model of perfect behavior. I'm saying that the things that we use as a shortcut for saying she got what she deserved, instead of look how she was dressed. It's, which is part of it too. She wears these crop top shirts. You can see her belly button. She deserves to be attacked, right? Like all of this stuff with Sheila really left a bad taste in my mouth. And I was wondering what your response to that was.
She doesn't feel like a character to me at all.
Yeah.
She feels she almost feels like a prop. I don't respond to her particularly strongly. I mean, in that opening scene with Snyder where he's doing his little compare and contrast with them, and Sheila stabbed a horticulture teacher with a trowel and she corrects him. No, it was pruning shears.
Yes.
I mean, this girl was born to be a vampire. She's just she's not only is she bad, but she's gleefully bad, right? She's like smiling and I mean, Lani, she's chewing gum. Come
I know.
on.
If you're chewing gum, you're obviously just a terrible human being.
Obviously. But, we get the line from Willow about she's been smoking since the 5th grade and she goes home.
And I was her lookout once. Yeah.
Yeah. She goes home with some guy named Meat Pie, which.
Right. Whatever the hell that's about. But I mean, that's the thing. Like I feel like we're looking at this, amalgam of bad girl stereotypes. And saying, I think she deserves what she gets because she's so awful. But a lot of the things that she is portrayed, that are portrayed as awful, are things which, in somebody who didn't have all the other awful characteristics, would still be a reason to dismiss a female character. We're going to see that in season 3 when we hit Faith. Faith is this done right, with complication and layers and nuance and interest. Sheila is just this way to kind of dismiss her as deserving what she gets. We have the moment where she's, hanging by her wrists as Drusilla's about to feed on her, watching Spike and Drusilla's moving her dolls around,
Yeah.
And in that moment, she's terrified, obviously, clearly, so we get one brief moment where we have sympathy for this girl, but God only knows, what happened to her prior to that made her, and not the promiscuity, not the smoking, not the attitude, but like the kind of girl who would stab anybody with pruning shears, the kind of girl who would, completely bail on somebody when you have a responsibility to help them out. Like, the kind of girl who would go out with anybody who allows himself to be called meat pie, right?
Yeah.
Like this kind of, like, the things that lead to that are completely ignored. The things that would give us sympathy for this character. We have one moment of sympathy for her, but the rest of it is like, well, she deserved it. She was walking in an alleyway with men she doesn't know, and somehow that's her fault.
Yeah,
rather than the responsibility of whoever she's with. I mean, granted, the one that hurt her, the guys were also killed by Spike. So, the one who hurt her was a vampire, but like, that's his fault. That's the vampire's fault. If the guys had done anything bad to her, it would be their fault that she got hurt, not hers. But I think that we kind of put it on Sheila.
Yeah, well, she's so awful right from the beginning that we're not even allowed to have any sympathy for her, really. In that moment where she's terrified and bound and gagged in Spike and Drusilla's bedroom, she's scared, but we're so invested in what's going on with Spike and Drusilla that I don't think we even... I think her fear is as much a prop as she is. I don't think we feel for her in that moment so much as we're watching her be afraid, and how that is a contrast with the glee that Spike has about how well this plan is going.
Right. And her fear is also just something to highlight Drusilla.
Exactly.
Whose, savagery in that moment is so incredibly cool.
Yeah.
Right. That moment where she just turns and then moves so fast on Sheila's neck and we cut. That was beautifully done. As far as Juliet Landau, genius. We're going to get to that in a minute.
Yes.
But yeah, like, we don't ever have a moment with her, where we actually, she is simply there to reflect other people, other characters back at us,
Right. And to show us that Buffy isn't really a bad girl. Sheila is a bad girl who deserves to be in trouble. Buffy doesn't deserve to be in trouble. I think that's that feels like the only reason we even have Sheila in the story. She's not a character. She is a foil for Buffy. She's a dark reflection of Buffy. And I think she's Buffy's, that remark about, when my mother looks at me, she sees a Sheila, really doesn't feel right to me. I understand that that's Buffy's fear, but I really don't see how Buffy could see herself in Sheila.
I think she sees an unfair reflection of herself, an unfair perception. I mean, Snyder treats her like a Sheila, puts her in the same, category with Sheila, and I think that Buffy feels like, it's really unfair. And then we, which brings us into kind of like the next topic, which is, Buffy's impossible situation, like her impossible life. She has this line where she says, I have at least 3 lives to contend with, none of which really mesh. It's kind of like oil and water and a third unmeshable thing,
right.
And then when she's talking to Joyce, and Joyce is being, pretty awful. Again, we'll get to that in a second.
Yeah.
It's awful. Joyce says, well, wait until you get a job. And she's like, I have a job. She has this secret identity. She has this sacred calling, this, responsibility that she cannot let go, which she is supposed to maintain while doing everything else that she's supposed to do, just to be a regular kid who, does well in school and is doing what she needs to do. Right. Buffy has every reason to behave like Sheila. Buffy has every reason to be like, all right, so I have a short, nasty, and brutal death coming up on me.
Yep.
I'm not going to go to college. I'm not going to live a long life. I'm a fucking slayer. I might as well have fun. And when we get to Faith in season 3, we're going to see that done right. Mm-hmm. We're going to see all of this done right. Sheila feels like the proto-Faith.
Yeah.
None of the good stuff.
Yeah.
But we have Buffy with all of the weight of these responsibilities.
Definitely. And I think that we see her balance them really well throughout this episode. That's the struggle for her of the whole episode. But for my money, she does a great job. I mean,
Yeah, no, it's amazing what she does.
When life gives you lemons, you make lemonade with no sugar, but
With no sugar, you do the best you can.
you do the best you can. But that's also sort of nicely symbolic, right? That she doesn't put the sugar in the lemonade, that she's not going to sweeten this experience for herself.
Right.
She's not going to sugarcoat it. I don't know. Maybe that's a bit of a stretch, but I like it.
No, actually, I think that's a really great insight into that. The fact that she does skip the sugar. She doesn't have time for sugar.
Yep.
There is no sugar anywhere in her life, except for maybe a little sprinkled on Angel. But
Yeah.
but I mean, like everywhere in her life, she has to deal with the rotten things she's got. There's nothing she can do to make it better. And so I kind of think that is a nice metaphor. I don't know if it was deliberate, but I like it.
Yeah, I like it too. And I love Willow's reaction. That
I know.
the whole reason for the no sugar in the lemonade is that amazing
Oh, yeah.
Willow not quite spit take. It goes on just
so that later, later when she says, Cordelia, have some lemonade.
It goes on just a little bit too long. I love it so much. Yeah, we do have Buffy and Joyce sort of pitted against each other in this, in the first third of the episode. And I don't know. We get bad Joyce in this episode.
We do get bad Joyce. This is one of the problems I've always had with Buffy, especially in the early seasons, right? Mm-hmm. We have Joyce being just terrible. Joyce, even without knowing everything else that Buffy's going through. We have this horrible moment where she's like, we moved because you were causing all this trouble, not because I divorced your father and couldn't stand to be in the same town with him anymore. No. Had nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
I had to get a new job. I had to do all this stuff to take care of what? Of you. And what I don't want is to be disappointed in you again.
Disappointed
that
in you
is the
again.
meanest thing. That is the meanest thing.
That is so, so harsh.
It is so terrible. And as a mother, it's like, I mean, there have been times with my kids where I'm like, hey, you got to do better, right?
Yeah.
But you don't make that about a guilt trip. Like, I don't want to be disappointed in you. Like, I'm not disappointed in you. What I want is better for you because I think you deserve better. And here's how you can get better for yourself. Like, that's what you do as a parent, because that should be the angle you're coming from, that it's not about, me being disappointed. I mean, sometimes it is. I ask you to do the dishes. You didn't do the dishes. I'm annoyed. Fine.
Yeah.
I'm a little annoyed because you didn't do that. But when it comes to stuff like this, like serious things that are putting a child at risk, that's about them. That's about what's best for them. Like, as a parent, you signed up for those inconveniences. Mm-hmm. You signed up. I mean, and so for some of us, it's easier than others. I got off way easy. My kids were great. They were well behaved. They never got in trouble. They got fantastic grades. They were always wonderful. Like, I got off really easy, and I know that. So I know that it's easy for me to say that, given that I've almost never had to have that kind of conversation. But whenever there was an issue, it's about the kid. It's about like, if Joyce in this moment, if we had changed nothing, but Joyce said, look, honey, you're so smart. You've got so much going for you. And I don't know what it is that's making this difficult for you, but you are worth the hard work that you need to put in. Because in this circumstance, without Joyce knowing about the Slayer stuff,
right,
that would be probably where, you're worth that hard work. You're worth doing this for. So you can have the same thing without it being Joyce making it about this guilt trip on Buffy.
Well, and you could even drive home Buffy is a Slayer and has this really ugly future ahead of her, potentially, with Joyce saying something about, Joyce could be angry and say something to the effect of, if you got kicked out of another school, you're not going to have the kind of bright future that you deserve.
Right.
And
even that. Yeah.
That kind of, as a mother, you certainly have every right to complain about the things your children do, not to your children.
To your mother friends.
Yes.
To your friends who are mothers. That's where it becomes about you.
Then you can say, oh my God, my kid, I moved my entire life and my kid can't get her shit together. I mean, that is where you complain about your experience. But Joyce, I mean, she's so out of line. And it's such a weird scene that's just hurtful on a number of levels because it does not mesh with the Joyce we've seen so far.
No, it's definitely two completely different Joyces. And I think that what happens is that we have these scenes where we need Buffy to really feel terrible. We just need to make her miserable. So we make Joyce awful. But we don't want Joyce to be unlikable or truly awful. So in the next scene, we go and we make her great. So my feeling on it is like, I always read this as we're so deep in Buffy's POV that even though that's not what Joyce is actually saying, that's what Buffy hears.
Yeah.
So I headcanon that because otherwise we've got two different Joyces.
Well, and
throughout a lot of the series until she finds out and kind of things calm down as far as that goes. But I don't know.
But directorially, we do have two Joyces in that scene because we start with Joyce and Buffy in the mirror. And then Buffy turns away from Joyce's reflection, but then we see Buffy in close-up. And then there's this wonderful camera move where we follow Buffy as she crosses the room and sits down on the bed. And then we finally get to see Joyce standing in the doorway. We finally cut to Joyce, not reflected in Buffy's mirror, but as she actually is standing there. So, I mean, I co-sign your headcanon, I guess is what I'm saying. That this is really about, Joyce in the mirror, Buffy's reflection, her imagination of her own role in her parents' breakup. I mean, we had that. Yeah. This is literally the stuff of Nightmares, the episode,
right.
Buffy's fear that her parents' breakup is her fault.
Right.
So, yeah, it's unnecessarily cruel. It's unnecessarily selfish of Joyce. And the way that the scene is played on Buffy's end, she's not completely heartbroken by this line about being disappointed. She's just kind of, yeah, you're right, sort of, she's sort of resigned to this idea that her mother's disappointment is inevitable if things continue.
Right. And from Buffy's POV, you look at that scene and it's not that, like, it's hard. But when you actually look at Joyce and say, what the hell are you saying to your kid?
Yeah.
Like, this is cruel, So, that whole, it's really interesting because I do like Joyce.
Yeah, I do
like,
too.
I like the Joyce, it's Shadow Joyce and Shadow Xander, right? Except I think it's a different phenomenon with Joyce. I don't think it's a cultural phenomenon so much as it is a writing thing that you really need to torment your characters. And Joss Whedon at the helm of any show is probably one of the masters of torment your characters. Never give them a moment's happiness. Or if you do, make sure that you follow it with a misery that is equal to and excesses of that by at least 200%, right? So I think that, like, the need to maximize Buffy's feeling terrible, Buffy's guilt, Buffy's shame, and really complicate her sense of herself. We bring Joyce in to serve that purpose without writing Joyce as a character. Again, she is the stand-in mom who doesn't understand. And I think that from when you're really in Buffy's POV, you're like, okay. But when you step outside of it and you reject the premise that this is okay for Joyce to say to her daughter, and it's one thing as a parent to be like, look, this has been my experience. Like, this is what it's like from my end. So you understand, like, what but you also, like, don't use that to guilt them.
No.
You don't use that to shame them and manipulate them. You don't, well, I mean, people do.
Yes.
People have been doing that for, since time immemorial.
Oh, yeah.
But I think that, like, we can begin to understand now the kind of damage that carrying that kind of weight, carrying the weight of your adult considerations, a child cannot carry that weight on them.
Right.
That's not fair. So it becomes, it's kind of an interesting thing. It's very complicated, and I find myself just having to headcanon my way out of it, that it was just the writers were writing this moment so deeply from Buffy's POV that we didn't step out of it to question whether that was an appropriate thing for Joyce to say.
Absolutely. And then we flip Joyce. And and then we flip Joyce and we get some really, really good Joyce in the second.
We get some fantastic Joyce as soon as the vampires attack, right? That is the turning point, because up until then she talked to Principal Snyder. She was like, get in the car now. Buffy was in trouble. Then we have the attack, we have the crisis, and Joyce sees what Buffy does and how Buffy handles it. And there's that moment after Buffy has left and Joyce is in the room with Snyder and she's saying no, and when they're trying to go out the window, no, you heard what Buffy said. Like, she is not questioning Buffy's authority. Right. She is absolutely in line. She knows that her daughter's going to handle it. She trusts her daughter. And this whole thing, you know, is so great. And I love this turn in Joyce.
It's so wonderful. It's so wonderful. I love Joyce getting a Sigourney Weaver in Aliens get away from her, you bitch moment with Spike in the axe. I was like, oh, hell yeah.
It's fantastic. I love that. It
makes me so happy. And it brings me all the way back to, or all the way forward, I guess, to the end of the series where every woman who would be a slayer becomes a slayer. Yeah. And I'm just like, I want some 40-something slayers out there kicking ass because...
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The moms,
that would be a fantastic
the mothers
story.
of teenagers who have seen all of the shit and have time for none of it. No fucks to give. Those are the slayers I want. Somebody write me that series because
I totally want that slayer story.
I want slayers in their like 40s, 50s, and 60s. That's what I want. Yeah.
Absolutely. Just kicking ass. I think that would be fantastic. I love this too. And I don't know that I really believe it, you know, but it's like, you know, here Spike is, he's fighting the Slayer.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
He's got the jump on the Slayer. Mm-hmm. Then the Slayer's mom comes out and he's like, oh no, now I'm going to run away.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know if I believe that. I think that there maybe needed to be something more. And then he has this thing, a Slayer with family and friends. Like, how do we? And I'm like, I don't believe that.
Yeah.
Spike, you know, supposed to be such a dangerous, badass vampire.
Yeah. I read that more as he had this, because Spike is so theatrical, and we'll get to that in a minute, but he's so theatrical and so performative. And his show was just, he was upstaged in his own show. And he's almost, it's less about him being afraid and more about him losing his dignity. That he, maybe not dignity, but his sense of control over the scene. He is playing this in a very specific way. He's very aware of what he's doing. And this was not part of his plan at all. He was ready to put another notch in his peroxide bottle, and he had not, like, this had never crossed his mind. And having something, you know, he's the rule breaker, and Joyce just broke the rules. She one-ups him in that way. So, yeah, it does. I mean, I don't like that he doesn't really acknowledge what's happened. He goes, women, and then he runs off, and he, oh my God, his Batman out the window is so good.
I love the Batman.
So good. He throws his arms up in the air for no reason other than so we can see that giant coat perfectly cape behind him. It's fantastic.
Do we have any? We're going to talk about Spike next because I can't wait anymore. But do we have anything else about Joyce before we go?
Well, I just love the idea that even, you know, the scary ass vampire is no match for a mother defending her child.
Yeah, no, I thought that was good. I liked that a lot. And I like at the end, you know, when they're leaving and Joyce says, Principal Snyder said you were a troublemaker and I could care less. I have a daughter who's brave and resourceful and thinks of others in a crisis. Yeah. You know, and I'm going to sleep better knowing that.
Yeah.
And that is a great moment from Joyce.
Yeah. And it's a nice, not quite callback to Snyder's initial remark to Buffy about parents, if you have any. Not only does Buffy have a parent, but her parent is a badass, and her parent is, you know, on board with her. And that's great. So we end Joyce in this episode on a really good note, I think.
I think that we do. And the thing is, like, it's hard with Joyce to come down one way or the other. I mean, nobody expects you to be perfect as a parent. Nobody can be perfect as a parent. We all have bad moments, you know. It's just that Joyce's bad moments aren't just, I think, coming from like a moment of weakness or a moment where you said the wrong thing and all that kind of stuff. It feels out of character. It feels like these two parts of her are not consistently characterized, right? But I like the good Joyce, and so I headcanon the bad Joyce.
Yeah.
That's just how I work with it.
No.
All right. So Spike. Spike come busting into town, running over the welcome to Sunnydale sign, home sweet home.
Oh my gosh.
You know, this becomes an iconic thing for him. We're going to see him, you know, run over that sign again, which is going to be really fun. And then he comes out and he's got his vamp face on. And when you said that Spike was performative, I thought, you know what? He really is. He pulls, like, a lot of vamps, they vamp up and when they've got the feed, when, you know, they're in a fight, when they're aroused or whatever. But he vamps up very specifically. And you could say, yes, it's a choice of the, you know, of the production team because they want us to know that he's a vampire. He has to be in vamp face, you know, when he addresses the kid. He has to be like, we see what a bad guy he is because he is so adorable when he's just in regular face, you know. But I think we would have gotten that anyway, except that he does have this very performative element to the character that every move he makes, everything he does, it is this highly performative thing. And Drusilla does that too.
Yes.
You know, when she scratches his face and licks it, when they almost kiss and then both turn at the same time to face the anointed one.
Yes.
Such great fun.
They're amazing. This introduction of Spike is probably my favorite thing in the show so far.
Right.
That guitar riff, and then we see his boot clomp down on the ground, and it's just like there he is in vamp face, and if that wasn't enough, he lights up a cigarette. You know, just like, you know. And we have established that smoking is bad because Sheila's been smoking since 5th grade.
Right.
And Buffy's old school was burned down by mice who were maybe smoking. So, you know, but
problematic mice.
So, yeah, those were bad mice. But he is so great, and he just is happy to be his demonic self in that moment. And I love it. I love it so much.
I think it's so incredible. And James Marsters as Spike is incredible. I love the evolution of his accent too. You know, like he is working that accent so hard. He's an American actor, you know, working that accent so hard, and it comes much more naturally as he moves through, you know, but it's so funny. And he stomps into this scene. If every vampire said he was at the crucifixion was actually there, it would be like Woodstock.
Yep.
I love his whole thing.
His whole grandiosity about entering this space and just taking it over with his presence.
Right. And you know what I find works real good with Slayers? Killing them. And then, you know, to jump slightly back or a little bit forward, depending on how you're looking at this conversation, the moment when he decides not to kill Buffy because her mother was there.
Yeah.
Is that just an excuse because he's already kind of in love with Buffy?
You know, I wondered about that, about when, like, what his feelings for and about Buffy are right off the bat. Because when that sequence where he's watching her dance is just, I mean, talk about, this is the John T. Kretschmer appreciation corner of Still Pretty Today. Oh my God, that move, the camera move that just sort of goes from the dance floor to kind of the crowd of the bronze. And then we find Spike lurking in the shadows watching, and the music
and moving
changes.
So slowly. Yeah.
He's so slow. He's so deliberate. And then there's this moment where he's watching her dance, and we get the reverse shot of his eye line on her. And she's smiling and having fun with her friends. And there's this little moment where he there's a little breath, a little exhale. And then he snaps to attention and goes and gets the vamp and says, go get something to eat.
Yes.
There's this little, like, he's got to pull himself together.
Yeah.
He's got to pull himself back to business mode. He's here to do a thing.
Right.
But there's this wonderful little, it looks to me like he just like takes a little breath
Yeah.
And I love it. And I don't know what all to do with it other than use it as sort of the first point in this, what's going to be a really, really compelling relationship.
It is. It's a lot of fun. There are many points throughout the Spike and Buffy relationship when one should have killed the other, and they choose not to. Every time they choose not to. And it's very interesting how they both pull back from that. Now, of course, you can, go into the extra textual space and say, well, he was amazing and we didn't want to get rid of him, so we had Buffy not kill him. Right. Or, she's the titular character. Obviously, he can't kill her. But running away because her mommy came out with an axe, like, this is not a guy who's afraid of that. I think it was an excuse. I think that I headcanon that it was an excuse because he didn't want to kill Buffy because part of him has been in love with her always.
Aww.
Before he knew her, I think he was in love with her. So I found that really interesting and fun. I love the interactions with the two of them. Spike and Drusilla. Let's just talk about Drusilla a little bit, because Drusilla, played by Juliet Landau, is a revelation. She is so incredibly weird.
Yes. And
good and creepy and lovely, and God, I don't even know if I have enough adjectives to describe Drusilla. How do you like her? With that kind of intro, I guess your only option is to say you love her, but maybe you don't like her. I don't know.
No, I love Drusilla. I especially love Drusilla and Spike as a unit.
Yes.
When Spike comes in, he's in vamp face, and he's in vamp face until she enters, and then he turns around to face her and he de-vamps. He, we see him in his non-vamp face, his regular face, his beautiful, beautiful Billy Idol face. And I love this choice that Drusilla connects Spike to his humanity, that his care for her, and we see that in the transformation of vamp face to human face. But she is absolutely remarkable. Her nonsense makes just enough sense.
Yes.
And their choreography is beautiful. And I'm going to go with choreography and not blocking.
Yes.
Because it really is like a dance. The way she walks in with this, she almost floats in that weird sort of nightgown, christening gown, wedding gown that she's wearing.
Yeah, the empire waisted,
with the little puff sleeves, so it's a little girly.
Yeah.
But there's something, she's incredible. She is somehow completely adult, but also very, very childlike in how delicate she is. But she's so deliberate. She's amazing.
No, it's unbelievable. Yeah. And also my response to Drusilla is informed by everything she does throughout the run of both this and Angel, when she spends some time over on Angel. Juliet Landau, I don't know how many actresses could have pulled off Drusilla. Drusilla is a lot of character in a tiny, tiny space.
Yes, she really is.
And I don't just mean she's physically tiny, which she is, she's very waif-like, but it's a tiny space. She has very few lines. She has very few lines, very little to do in this episode. But what she does with each word, like Juliet Landau gives weight to every word that Drusilla says, and it is unbelievable. The two of them together are just fantastic. I love everything about them. A couple of things, though, that I always found interesting. We have this idea of vampires, right? That they are, that they're basically just a demon walking around in a human suit.
Right.
That there's no part of the original human left within them. And I think that Spike and Drusilla are some of the first textual evidence that we have to kind of counter that idea. Like Angel, we say he is who he is because he has his soul. He's a human that's stuck with a vampire demon inside of him, but he's still his human self because he has a soul, right? most vampires don't have the soul. So we kind of put all this weight that the soul is where you hold love, where you hold goodness, where you hold, and there's going to be a lot of textual evidence throughout the run of Buffy to kind of counter that idea of the soul, that the soul is what makes you good. And that the lack of a soul is what makes you bad. But here we have two vampires who are in love.
Yes.
Like, how do we explain love for a vampire without their human qualities? And you just said a little while ago, Drusilla gives him his humanity.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So what do you think about that?
I don't know that I read them as in love per se at this point. I read them as very much a partnership. They are complements to each other. And I think that that gets expressed really beautifully in their choreography. I mean, it's blocking, but it is so much like a dance. The way that, they almost kiss, but then turn their faces to, look at the group there. The way that he sort of dances her across the bedroom to the bed and then lays her down and then does this amazing little, I don't even know, it's like a little flip over her so that he's lying beside her, but it's so smooth and seamless. It really looks like ballroom dancing. They have this really unusual physicality in that first scene of the two of them together. There's a point at which he puts his hand kind of on her chest, sort of over where her necklace is, but he does it with his thumb down and his elbow up, and it is the most unusual looking touch that he then pulls back into having his hand resting on her shoulder. And I'm like, what even is that? But they just sort of glide together. The physicality of them together really establishes them as this graceful unit. She is his reason for being in Sunnydale. The Hellmouth is supposed to restore her. But I don't know that I would call their relationship a love relationship at this point necessarily. I mean, just, imagining that this is my introduction to Spike and Drusilla. I don't know. And then they're costumed, and the hair and makeup clearly makes them complementary opposites. He's got his long black coat. She's got her long white dress. He's got his, white blonde hair, and she's got her black hair. And they're these lovely opposites, but it's an opposites attract kind of energy. I love them. But he clearly has regard for her. There clearly are emotions going on.
Right.
I mean, he's concerned.
Well, he's incredibly romantic with her.
Yes, he's very romantic with her. And he's concerned about her well-being in a sort of kind of it's a little bit overbearing, but that encouraging her to eat kind of way. He's just, I don't know. There's something. It's fascinating, and it does not line up at all with what we've been told about vampires so far.
Right. It gives us a very human sense. I mean, it's dark humanity, but it's a human sense of vampires and their personalities.
Yes.
And who they are. Because Drusilla has a very strong personality. And so does Spike.
Yes.
And so when you bring those Spike is always joking. Drusilla has the sight or whatever. It's very interesting that we see all of this personality within these vampires, that there is personality to be had there, that there is a spark of who they are. They're just without guilt and empathy, and remorse. So they just do whatever it is that they got to do. But I do find it interesting because there is a sense of the performative in their love story, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And I've talked a bit, I don't know if I've talked about it on this show or not, but I know I've talked a bit around about the difference between a romance and a love story, right? That a romance is about this, kind of sexual, heightened, romantic, performative, spectacular in the sense that it is spectacle,
Yes.
Story, this big, Heathcliff on the Moors kind of bullshit, right? But the romance is, and I write romances, I love romance. I'm always there for the heightened romance, but it is bullshit. It's not real. So there's romance, and then there's a love story, and it's possible that I think that he does love Drusilla. I think that Spike is not Spike if he doesn't love something, that he is motivated by love. And as we see Spike, evolve throughout the run of the show, of this show and Angel, and we learn more about his history and we learn about who he is always in love. He is always in love, with the exception of Harmony, but that'll be interesting when we see that play out. He cannot even work up the romance because he is all about the romance in the story.
Yes.
But the story with him and Buffy is not a romance. It's a love story because it's almost that he loves her despite everything and he doesn't want to love her, but he ends up in love with her and just is stuck there.
Yes.
There's nothing he can do about it. Whereas with Drusilla, he is reaching out for this romantic, this performative, this spectacular, thing with him and Drusilla, goddess of the dark, whatever. And with Buffy, it is just simply, and we'll see that at the end of the run of Buffy, I love what you are. I love what you do. And that's when he really explains what the love story is between him and Buffy. So going from the Drusilla and Spike performative, and I do believe that is love. It's a dark and twisted love. And Drusilla at some point during the run, I think it's in Crush, maybe it's in season 6 where she says, we love, perhaps not wisely, but we love, season 5 or season 6. I don't know. But we move into this space with Buffy and Spike, which is just in the beginning. And I'm not sure that any of this was intentional, but there is such a wonderful, kind of synchronicity with these two characters. He is danger.
Yes.
He is sex, right? He's got the black leather coat and the red shirt underneath, Drew scrapes his left cheek, right? And leaves that smudge of blood there. And in the next scene, we cut to Buffy, who has a smudge of red paint on her cheek.
Yep.
That's not an accident, right?
No, not at all. Not at all.
Okay.
No.
All right. So this says these two are connected.
Yes.
Visually, we're connecting these two, right?
Yes, we're connecting them visually. We're connecting the vampire story that is launched with Spike and Drusilla to the mundane, which is Buffy painting these posters for parent teacher night. We've absolutely formed this connection between them. And it's fantastic. Those little,
but it's not necessarily romantic yet.
No,
and that's the thing. There's this kind of Venn diagram overlap space between romance and the love story. You can have a space where you have both. And I think that's the ideal space from which to tell a romance story. But the story with Buffy and Spike is not romantic.
No.
It's a love story, but it's not one of these wild romantic Mr. Darcy. It's none of that, right? This is dark and it's messy and they don't want to be connected.
Yeah.
They don't want to love each other. It's not performative. They're both resisting it and they will resist it for a really long time. As a matter of fact, I don't even think Buffy gets close to loving Spike until season 7. Her connection with Spike comes for her from a much darker sort of self-flagellating space, but they are connected.
Yes.
Regardless of whether there's a romantic element to it or not, there is a connection between them. And I love when he's watching her. The first time Spike ever sees Buffy, and that this is going to so fully alter his entire existence in a way that cannot be predicted from just this moment, But when the full weight of what happens with Buffy and Spike, this moment is so powerful. This is the moment when he first falls in love with her.
Yeah.
I fully believe it. This is the moment where it literally falls into the love story with her.
Well,
Like, that's it.
And I love the way he draws her out into the alley to fight.
Yes. Yes, somebody's getting bit out there. I need to call the police.
The way he comes back in with I need a phone. He's so, it is so a performance. And then he watches her fight. And then when she's done, he applauds. As he steps out of the shadows. And I love it. I love that this is all about roles for him and role playing. At the end, Buffy says, "Do we really need weapons for this?" And Spike says, "I just like them. They make me feel all manly." I mean, he is self-aware. He is aware. I mean, he's so aware of what he's doing and what she's doing.
Right.
It's amazing to me. I love that first interaction between them.
Yeah.
Nice work, love. Who are you?
Yes. It's so good. I love all of that between them. And I love also that we have this element of Spike that is going to be a huge part of his character moving forward, which is that he just doesn't think. He doesn't think things through. He just is of the moment.
Oh, yeah.
Like, that is it. Whatever the moment is. And then, like, the night of St. Vigius, the one thing that they're all like freaking out about is happening on Saturday. It's happening on Saturday. Well, it's a good thing parent teacher night is Thursday. So at least we know Buffy can only focus on one thing. And then, of course, he attacks and he says, "What can I say? I got bored."
Yeah.
He's like, that's it. I couldn't wait. And he just jumps into a situation that he is not prepared for. And I think he likes being unprepared. I think Spike is at his best when he's thinking on his feet and he's not trying to adhere to any kind of plan. Like, he is not a planner. He is not a thinker. He is a feeler and a doer. And it's cool. When he does that. I mean, it means things get screwed up for him a lot.
Yes.
And he doesn't win. But he's not about the win. He's about the experience. He's about the moment. I mean, if ever there is anybody who lives in the now more than Spike, I've never seen a character that does, So I absolutely love that. And then we get to this point in the fight in the school where he says, "I'll make it quick. It won't hurt a bit." And she says, "No, Spike, it's going to hurt a lot." And that right there is their relationship in a nutshell.
Yep.
It is so great. And I love that relationship.
Spike is so fantastic on a number of levels. It's funny to me that we have this idea that vampires play by the rules, right? That up until this point, it's been, it's the first full moon after whatever, or it's the night of this, or the 3 days after, there's something that tells them, all right, tonight is the night. So we know that we are prepared for this night. And Spike says, "I don't care about your feast of whatever. I want to do this, I'm going to do this my way." And he just, he rebels against that structure and that authority. And of course, he crashes parent-teacher night, which is structure and authority in the context of high school.
Of the mundane world. Right. Yeah, exactly. I also think that...
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I also think that Spike is transitioning us away from this very early idea of vampires as religious order, which we started with the Master, right? The Master was leading this thing. He had all these people. They were so faithful to him. He was basically running a cult.
Yes.
And so we've had the Night of St. Vigius and the Order of Aurelius and, the Harvest and all of these ritualistic, kind of very reflective of ancient rites and religions, within these vampires. And we move from there into this kind of more secular space with these secular vampire. The vampire who's here, sometimes they'll run in a pack because, there's safety in numbers. But generally, he's out for himself. He's doing his own thing. He does not care about your Night of St. Vigius. Yeah. He does not care about your ancient prophecies. He does not care about your master or your anointed one or whatever. He is here to be a goddamn vampire, and that's his business, and that's what he does. So Spike gives us this transition within the world of Buffy away from this religious sect vampire model that we opened with and into if we see a ritual throughout the run of Buffy, it's because that ritual, not because there's an ancient sect or there's a belief system or anything, but because that ritual will do something very specific for whoever the antagonist is.
Right.
That it is very much a transactional thing. The way that we go to the ATM and we punch our number in because it's required in order for us to get our money, that's not a ritual. That's just something we do to get from A to
Right.
B. Like, that's what happens when we do have ritual, I'm thinking of the mayor eating all of the black licorice bugs or whatever, right? Which is really gross. Like, that kind of thing we'll see, but it's never because of faith. It's because of transaction, which is a much more secular thing. It's just that the world is broader, as opposed to having some kind of faithful, cult-like, experience in our vampires. So I'm actually, another reason, like, there are tons of reasons why I love this episode and why this episode marks, like the beginning of Spike for me, which is wonderful. And there's all these things, but I really like moving away from that kind of religious cult model for vampire community into this more, we do what we want when we want to and fuck all y'all kind of thing. I like that.
Well,
better.
and you just said something that sparked an idea for me, which is Spike is here to be a vampire.
Yes.
And I love that is such a clear articulation of something that I was noticing throughout the episode, which is, so I've talked about Spike as a performer. He's very theatrical.
Yes.
He has this grandiose sense of himself. And I think he's very committed to the role of being a vampire.
Yes.
And
capital A, capital V.
Yeah. And what I love is that in this, so he's clearly, he's a Billy Idol, right?
Yes.
Clearly he is. He's got this.
Well, actually, Billy Idol stole his look from Spike. That's a line that Buffy has later on.
I love it so much. He is this punk rock god just storming into Sunnydale. And he equates vampirism with masculinity in this really, it's performative gender in the queer theory sense. So he when he knocks out the first vamp who's, being all braggy about having been at the crucifixion, he calls him Nancy Boy to, because masculinity is homophobic. But,
absolutely.
But then he says, now, any of you want to test who has the biggest wrinklies round here, step on up. Which is just, I can't with that line, but it's such a perfect Spike line. It's this, vampirism for Spike is masculinity. He's the vampire with the biggest balls, and that's just what, and he wants the weapons because they make him feel manly. He's very invested in this kind of, this sort of, masculine performance that he's putting on, which is why I think when he's knocked over by Joyce and Buffy, he says women before he scurries away. He's very much in the on the flip side, he's in the lover protector role with Drusilla. It's very he drapes her in his coat in this really loving way. He's very gentle and careful with her in this sort of weirdly gentlemanly way. He's the leader in their dance. If you're watching them dance across the floor in that shot that I just absolutely love where Sheila's tied up in the background, we don't call it out at all, but there she is. We just glide right by her. Because she's
just a sandwich on a plate.
Well, she's there to be a prop. That's all. We talked about that already, but the way, the way he applauds Buffy's fight, but then is kind of, I don't know, he's sort of patronizing towards her about that moment where he walks away and she lets him is such an interesting one to me, that there's this power dynamic already in place, but I don't know sort of what it is, but he's so, I don't know. I love this idea of Spike's creation of his own brand of vampire masculinity, and that is what he's doing, and that it's conscious, that he's very aware of the performance that he's putting on. I don't know. I love it. I love,
Absolutely.
we're going to probably going to end up talking a lot about vampires and gender and, what the gendered nature of vampirism on this show.
Yeah.
But Spike has really set that new precedent, I think.
Yeah. It's interesting, though, because he does have this very masculine way in which he addresses everything,
Yeah.
right? But I don't feel like he's misogynistic. I don't think that he looks down on Drusilla as lesser because she is a vampire. Like, I think that he also allows a space for her to have a feminine vampirism.
Yes.
Which is not something up until this point that we've really seen.
No.
Like, the male vampires had personality.
Yes.
Darla had a little bit of personality before we dusted her, right? She was a female vampire who was allowed to be female, who was allowed to be feminine, who was allowed to be a woman.
Right, but she was still aggressive
rest,
in a way that was sort of gender flipped. And then, of course, her undoing is when she comes out with guns and has all of this.
The ultimate phallic symbol?
Yeah. Well, I mean, Lani, it points and shoots. Come on. But she comes out with 2 guns, and that is just that's too much masculine energy for one female vampire. Thank you very much.
It's too much power. Yeah, it's too much power for a woman. It's interesting because I don't see that in Spike. I see him very much like loving his masculine energy.
Yes.
But I don't think that he wants to take away. And actually having him say women, like that doesn't feel like a Spike line. That is the one line where I was like, that doesn't feel like
It doesn't
Spike.
feel like a Spike line, but I think it's
humans. I could see him be like, humans, Jesus. I could see that. But I see him looking down on people because they're people, but not because they're women.
I don't think it's a looking down on. I think it's a being annoyed with. I think it's a, I would have gotten away with it if it weren't for you meddling women.
Right. But if a boy had done the same thing to him, he wouldn't have been like, he was annoyed with Angel. We have this wonderful moment, right? God. When Angel comes in with Xander.
Yes!
With Spike and is like, shall we feed and all this kind of stuff, and it's just, and I love when Spike punches him. He's like, you think you can fool me? You were my sire, man. You were my Yoda. Like, you Uncle Tom, right?
Hi, everyone. Noelle here. I'm calling myself out because I dropped the ball with respect to addressing racism in this episode. When Spike berates Angel for refusing to prey on humans, he says, you Uncle Tom. Uncle Tom has a crucial and complex role in U.S. history, both as the title character of Uncle Tom's Cabin and as a derogatory term for a Black man who is seen as being willing to do anything to remain in good standing with white people, including betray other Black people. Now, I'm not a scholar of Black history or Black culture. I'm a white person with Google who is working to be a better ancestor. And if you're listening to this podcast, you probably have access to the same search engines that I do. For now, I'll say that the choice to have one white vampire use a racist expression toward another white vampire is problematic at best. I'd love to continue this conversation if you're so inclined, so please @ me on Twitter and continue to call me in, call me out, so I can continue to educate myself and we can all learn together. Thanks.
This whole thing with Angel and, and he doesn't know that. I mean, I don't know where the clarity comes in. Like when Spike found out that Angel got his soul, I'm still not, we're going through so many layers because I'm 3 years ahead of this space in Buffy over in Still Dead, where we're talking about, about Angel and all of that stuff. And the history between Spike and Angel, this is somewhat retconned from where we are right now. What we see right now, you were my sire. Angel actually wasn't his sire. Drusilla was his sire. So, I mean, we're retconning a lot of this relationship. So what we get here in this moment isn't necessarily, indicative of what their relationship is at that point. But, I just saw the flashbacks to the Boxer Rebellion where, Spike killed the Slayer in China. And at that point, Angel had his soul, but Spike didn't know that. And like when Spike learns that Angel has his soul, that there's a difference between Angel and Angelus and all of that kind of stuff. It's very complicated. I'm not sure exactly when we get that shift. But Spike and Angel are one of my favorite relationships throughout Buffy. So it was really fun to see their first on-screen interaction.
I love that scene. Love it. Everything about it.
I think it's great. But he was really annoyed with Angel in that moment.
Yeah.
And annoyed with Xander, I guess, but he's not like, oh man, there's something about the way he says women. I feel like, yes, I understand that he's annoyed with them, but I don't think that he would be annoyed with them and blame it on their gender. It just doesn't feel like Spike to me because he loves women.
Yes, that's fair. And he's very, he's not hyper masculine in his own gender presentation. He's hyper masculine in his performance
and his performative,
but he looks quite androgynous, which is interesting to me as well.
He's real pretty. He's very pretty.
Oh, he is so pretty.
He is incredibly, incredibly pretty. But I love that idea of performative Spike. I hadn't really thought about it that way before, but you're so right. It's absolutely essential to who he is. And who he is, like when somebody's in the room or when he's by himself. We won't see him by himself for a while, but he always has a performative element even when he is by himself, which is so interesting because it is part of who he is. He's always aware. He's always, I think, performing for himself. Yeah. So Spike is wonderful, and I'm so glad he's here. He marks a shift in the world building. He marks a shift in the writing, and this is the moment that you wait for. School Hard is the moment when Buffy turns, when Buffy starts to become really Buffy, and it's so fun. So we have some other little things that we can talk about a little bit, like Xander and Willow and Cordelia, right? Who are a lot of fun. I love that moment when Xander's going into Buffy's purse. She needs a steak. She's outside of the bronze fighting the vampire that Spike sent out to distract her. And he's going, yo, tampon steak,
I adore that moment. I adore that.
Yeah.
It's the perfect Buffy 3-beat. I mean, childhood.
Right. I didn't even see that. It's so brilliant. I love the way you
childhood with the yo-yo. Menarche, or the onset of menstruation with the tampon, and adulthood with the steak, which is connected to her job.
Right.
And I love the idea of these being 3 unmeshable things.
Right.
She carries them all with her.
All at any given time.
But they can't really coexist, and that is her job, is to carry them all together.
Is such a brilliant insight, Noelle. I cannot even get over that. I saw that in your notes and I was like, oh my God, it's brilliant.
Well, I love small details in production
design.
You're
so good at seeing that stuff.
Because somebody chose that, and I love it. And I gotta give it up for Nicholas Brendan and the way he handles that tampon when he realizes what it is the most authentic, uncomfortable with sexuality teenage boy fumble of an object. I love it. It's so great. He's so
and it's one of the only references to Buffy ever having her period that we ever, and this is one of the things where you can tell a woman was not running the show. There would have been a joke about Buffy's period at some point, although maybe it was something they couldn't do because the WB wouldn't let them. This was considered to be a show, I think, for younger audiences at first,
my God.
But
if I were writing the show, we would have a period reference probably every 4 episodes.
Oh, seriously?
Oh, yeah.
We would be talking about her period quite regularly.
It would be great. It would be great. And a lovely counterpoint to fighting vampires.
Yes.
But we actually, shout out to periods in this episode. We actually got a couple of period moments, which I just love.
Wait, we have period moments? We got tampons aside from that?
We have a tampon cameo. And then, this might be a bit of a stretch, and it gets me into a kind of icky sort of Hannibal Lecter space. But when Spike says, I smell the blood of a nice, ripe girl, is Buffy carrying her tampons with her because she's on her period while this
and he can
is
smell
going?
It. Oh, my God.
And then at the very end, when we have Cordelia praying and promising God that she won't She won't be mean to anyone unless it's that time of the month. So
right. Oh, I forgot. We do mention the
we've
periods
got a
there.
little,
oh my God.
a little, shout out to periods in the
Very
Buffyverse.
nice.
I love it. I love it.
I don't think we, honestly, I'm not sure we ever even so much as reference a woman's period again in the run of Buffy, but if we do, I know you'll see it. So.
I'm going to be watching for it now.
Oh, I love it. No, that's great. That's great. And again, it has to be all this kind of aside thing, right? It has to be that time of the month instead of unless I'm on my period.
Right. Or about to get my period, because it's
that.
Usually the pre-period week where hormones are just...
it's that PMS space where it's just the worst. It's just the worst. All right, so we've got this great thing with Xander. We've got Buffy's period, which I think is great. I'm so glad you picked up on all of that. And I love this moment too, where they're talking about Spike and Xander wants to run, and Willow says, "We can't run. That would be wrong. Can you hide?" It's so great. I love Willow in this episode. She's so fantastic.
Willow figuring out Angel's dating history brings me so much joy.
I know. Even if it was 2 a year over 400 years, I mean, that'd still be like...
Why do they call it a mace? So good.
It's so great. And I love, we have Cordelia, who is becoming more and more part of the team, right? She's there whittling sticks with everybody, prepping for parent-teacher night. She's part of the gang, which is really nice. And then we have this, this moment where she's, basically telling Buffy that Buffy's going to be grounded forever after her mom finishes talking to Principal Snyder. And Willow just says, "Hey, Cordelia, have some lemonade." Willow is not cowed by Cordelia. We've had this argument going on, online, and I still stand by it. Willow is in no way intimidated by Cordelia or she didn't like her, but she's not in any way cowed or bullied by Cordelia. Cordelia is not, Cordelia is just kind of standing there being, saying the true thing, being the truth teller, which of course means you're not going to be liked. Although there are a lot of good reasons. If you look back, she was a bully last, season, to not like Cordelia for a lot of reasons. But it's really fun. I love when Willow stands up to Cordelia.
I absolutely love Cordelia, just like that part of the group. I love that scene where we get a lovely Kretschmer-esque pan across the group, and here they all are just doing their thing, preparing as a team. And there's Cordelia. And I love the idea that after last week, Xander saved her life and then kind of blows her off. But I like the idea that she's like, no, I'm going to hang out with these people. Because they clearly know what's up.
Well, in Sunnydale, I think being in close proximity to the Slayer is not a bad idea in general. Yeah,
you pretty much that's where you want to go. But I love Cordelia, and I love Xander and Cordelia butting heads, but then both making the decision to sneak a slice of bell pepper when Buffy slips out of the room. So there, we've already got the opposites attract. And of course we have complementary colors with those bell pepper slices, because I love to read into the tiniest details.
I love it.
But I do love Cordelia as part of the group. And I love the way she's still herself. But she's part of the gang now. And it's just, I adore it.
She's very fun. I love Cordelia. Every time we see Cordelia, it always makes me happy. So it's really, really good. I'm very glad we're into season 2, where we're making her less of an asshole and more of a part of the team, which I really love.
And a great scream.
So also
a great scream. We had great Cordelia screams last week.
Cordelia's very good.
We have a fantastic scream when the vamp comes at her in the hallway, and then Willow grabs that bust and just whacks him.
I know. I love that. Willow is so badass. And Willow's in charge. Willow gets them into the closet. She's making sure everybody's safe. It's really
She covers
great.
Cordelia's mouth. Really She's standing behind her, covering her mouth. I love that scene. Or that little sequence. So it's great.
So we've also got Giles. Not much Giles
we don't get a lot of Giles
in this episode. But some, I especially love this moment, right? When the school's under attack, Buffy, manages to come through the ceiling,
Yes.
in the library, and Giles is about to go out and about to fight, and I'm not going to let her go out there by herself. I'm responsible for her. I have to go, and then she comes in and she says, Giles, my mother's in that room. If I don't make it out of here, I know you'll make sure that she does. And Giles just responds with, bloody right, I will. Like, he is about to go out and fight with her because his responsibility is not to watch and stand by, but to fight by her side. But then she comes in and she says, this is what's important to me. My mother is what's important to me. And that's what I need you to do. And he, without a blink, without an argument, without saying, I'm the man and I must protect you, says, bloody right, I will. Right? Like, his loyalty is not to his sense of his masculinity. His sense of him as her protector, his sense of like any of that identity. His loyalty is to Buffy. What does Buffy need? He is the ultimate in support person. Even though he's in this position, which comes down from the patriarchal as fuck Watchers Council thing, which we will get into. I mean, it is PAF, Watchers Council, like bad. But he comes from that background, wherein the Watcher is some sort of like authority figure or power over the Slayer. But his role, his identity, his everything is not about controlling her. It's not about, telling her what to do or having any kind of authority. It is about being a support figure, in this like real sense of actual support.
Yes.
She needs something. That's what he's going to do. And if it is fighting by her side and dying, if it is getting her mother out, whatever Buffy needs, that's what he sees his job as. And I love that from Giles.
This time through Buffy, I'm really appreciating Giles's relationship with Buffy as a coworker kind of relationship. I mean, it's an odd coworker relationship, but he really has respect for her and her role and for his role in relationship to her. And it's wonderful.
Yeah, no, it is. It's really great. And I mean, the thing is that he is in this role of teacher. Yes. Right. And the thing with being a teacher is that you can slide that. And the same thing with parent, right? It slides so easily into authority and control, But the truth is that a parent relationship, that a teacher relationship is a support relationship. I am not here to control you and have power over you. I am here to teach you. Yeah. As a parent, how to be a person, as a teacher, how to do whatever my thing is, right?
Yeah.
I am here as a support person to you. My job is about you and how I can support you. And Giles is both parent and teacher for her. And he sees that and he lives to that. He is there as a support person. Now, that doesn't mean that as a parent or a teacher that you shouldn't, assert, because things that this person you're supporting doesn't know. You have to assert some authority, but it is still in service of the support role. It's easy to shift that authority from support into power. And Giles doesn't do that. Yeah. And I love that.
Wonderful. And he's got just a great little moment where he's coming to tell her right at the beginning. She's painting the banner. He's coming to talk to her and he puts his hand in the paint and just keeps going. He just doesn't acknowledge. He's just so like, great. All right, we gotta do this thing. It's such a great little acting choice and such a great little moment for Giles and helps to kind of, I don't want to say undermine his authority, but make his, because he is telling her what to do in that moment, but he's not going to use any sort of authority as a weapon against her. He's just as paint stained as she is in that moment.
Right. Yeah, no, it's really, really great stuff. All right. So, I see in our notes that we have a John T. Kretschmer Appreciation Corner. So before we move into all of our regular segments, since this is the last time we'll be working with John T. Kretschmer and Buffy, I wanted to give you a moment to just talk about all the wonderful things he did in this episode as a director.
There's so many strong directorial choices in this episode, and I've already touched on lots of them, from that pan up Spike's, lovely long black coat as he enters the world of Buffy, to the beautiful use of long take, which just, it showcases the sets, Buffy's bedroom, Spike and Drusilla's bedroom, the bronze, but it also gives the actors this great opportunity for a more connected performance, because they're in the scene longer with each other. So they have to be tuned into each other. And it really, really shines. It gives us an opportunity for some great blocking. We talked already about Spike and Drusilla with Sheila tied up in the background. I absolutely love that scene. But also Buffy and Joyce in Buffy's bedroom, when Buffy's sort of moving across the room and the camera's following her, and then Joyce comes to sit down beside her on the bed. It feels very stylized, but also very naturalistic somehow. We get lots and lots of long, dark hallways, which just feels so Buffy to me. I feel like this is the show really starting to look and feel how it's going to look and feel for, certainly the remainder of season 2. And dude loves him a dolly or pan from left to right. Over and over and over again, we get the pan from left to right, dolly left to right. When we're in the library, for some reason, it's right to left, but I think that's because we have ostensibly come in through the double doors and we're seeing everybody in order, in that order. But I just love the sort of dance quality to the camera work, the shot composition. It's so pretty. It's just such a pretty episode, and I love it. I love it.
And that does make a difference too. Using a longer shot with movement as opposed to going from edit to edit to edit. These are things that I think that if you're not conscious of it, you don't realize how incredibly powerful those choices are. And sound is also another incredibly powerful choice. But there are a lot of these choices that are made in the making of a TV show or of a film that you don't realize how powerful they are. What a difference it makes when a director makes specific choices like that, and choosing to have a longer shot and to give us more space as opposed to just, cut over the shoulder, the two shot, and cutting back and forth, that we're actually moving. Like when we move, in those spaces, when we do the dolly, when we do the pan, we are in the space with that character. We are moving, through that experience. And I think that it is an invitation into the experience, very much visually. So, I'm with you. I think Kretschmer's got some
when
game.
when he gives us that quick edit, I'm thinking about Drusilla's transformation.
When she launches on Sheila, that is
it's so good. We're looking at Drusilla over Sheila's shoulder. We cut to Drusilla's addressing the dolls. We cut to the dolls. We cut back to Sheila and Drusilla is in vamp face. We don't see her change. And it happens mid-line. She's speaking off camera. We're looking at the dolls. It's so great. It's so abrupt. And there's no whoosh vamp face sound. There's no sound effect for the transformation.
Nope.
It's so
and then she moves so fast on Sheila. It is a truly scary moment, and we cut. So everything is so deliberately done. It's really wonderful.
I absolutely love that editing choice.
All right. So let's go to what are you wearing? The significance of clothing. And I actually have something here. I love seeing Buffy in overalls and an old t-shirt. I get Buffy's got a fashion thing, and there is nothing wrong with anybody, man or woman, who wants to decorate their bodies, who wants to, appear in the world a certain way. But when Buffy is killing vampires in leather and high heels, it always annoys me, because I'm like, no, I'm sorry. First of all, she's wearing leather pants. She's got to be sweating her ass off because she's beating up all these vampires in Sunnydale, California. It's warm there, you know? And then on top of it, running like that in high heels all the time. Bitch needs sneakers and jeans and sweatpants and t-shirts. And this is like the one time we get her in casual wear because she's going to be covered in paint. So I appreciated that. It was nice.
There's some good overalls in this episode. Earlier, Willow wears some black overalls that I think I had in high school. And speaking of Willow's wardrobe, Willow gets to wear a Scooby-Doo t-shirt.
Right. So this is one of the first Scooby references. Eventually they will, call themselves the Scoobies. They will self-appoint, the nickname. But up until now, we haven't really had a reference. So here we've got a visual reference to the Scoobies.
Yep. And we've got Xander's messenger bag, his sort of weird messenger bag that he's carrying at the beginning. That he cuddles when they tell him, some idiot says, as long as nothing bad happens. Right. Like, maybe it'll be different. He's like hugging his bag.
I know.
It looks to me like later on when Buffy drops down from the ceiling into the library to collect weapons that she's using Xander's bag.
That bag, right?
I think it's the same bag. It may not be.
It looks like the same
but it really
bag.
looks like the same bag, and I love that connection. And then Jenny Calendar is in this episode, but just barely, and her wardrobe is having an identity crisis.
Oh, wow. I didn't even notice. I didn't even care about Jenny. Anytime she showed up,
she's a non-character in this episode. But just last week, she wore that fantastic, sort of bondage gear inspired belt to the football game. And she's had some great wardrobe moments. I think it was last week that we talked about her lovely, open knit sweater and her little skirt. And she just looks so pretty and feminine. And this week she's sort of all over the place. It's like, they don't know whether they want to make her look like an adult in the sort of maternal space, or if they want to make her, if they want to continue with the sort of cool teacher thing that they've been doing. But it doesn't really matter because she's not really a presence in the episode.
Right. Yeah. No. I did like that we had Jenny doing the research that got us to St. Vigius, and that they were working together. And she was like, "You got to read something, written after 1066," and it was very cute.
But Giles can't bring himself to call what she's doing research. He says research, and then he corrects himself to surfing on what is it? Surfing on the computer.
On the computer or something. Yes,
he corrects himself, but. It's just, I love it. It's very funny to me.
Yeah. All right. So do we have much for our arc, the patriarchy, this week? I got to say, I don't think we had. Did we have any Shadow Xander this week, or was he just
we
good
just
Xander?
got good Xander this week.
We just got good Xander.
He's very cute. He's sort of funny, being sulky about not wanting to go get Angel, but,
Yeah. But he does. He goes and he gets Angel. He does the whole thing with Angel. It's good
and
Xander
I love...
this week.
What's this about you being his sire? What's a sire?
What's a sire?
Do I have to learn another paranormal word? What is happening? Poor Xander. Poor Xander.
So
he just wanted to whittle steaks and whistle a jaunty tune. That was all he was asking for. No, we don't have much real heavy-handed patriarchal bullshit this week. I like Spike hitting Buffy with a piece of the school itself.
Right.
That feels something.
Right. Well, it's about her getting hit in the face with one of her 3 unmeshable things, buy one with the other.
Well, and it's super minor, but I think Jenny exists in this episode solely to be Giles's reward at the end. She doesn't even answer his question when he asks about her wanting to continue to spend time with him. She just takes his arm and smiles, and they're, done deal. That heteronormative unit is restored and all is well in the world there.
Yeah.
But we don't have much. Mostly we have lovely performative masculinity from Spike, and we have Giles and Xander being awesome, and
Well, and performative authoritarianism from
Oh my
Snyder,
God.
but it doesn't. Is it? I'm not. Snyder does not strike me as the patriarchy so much as he's part of an authoritarian scheme and a way of looking at life that is very authoritarian, and that I think that he would be equal opportunity. Asshole.
Oh, he hates everyone.
You know, I'm sure there are boys in his office too. So
He
because
hates everyone.
it is not. It is not any of these particular things that are used to specifically, speak down to women. Although I guess when he is ignoring Joyce, while they're deciding to go out, but I'm not even sure that that's about. I think it's just about who Snyder is, not necessarily about Joyce and Buffy. Although I think that he probably does look down on women. I don't think we have specific evidence for this episode.
Yeah, I would.
He seems pretty equal opportunity asshole.
He does.
Me.
Yeah. I think he's an equal opportunity asshole.
I think so too. All right. So what are our girl power moments this week?
Well, we talked about Willow slamming the vampire with the bust and getting her and Cordelia to safety.
I love that. Mm-hmm.
We got good in a crisis Willow. We got good in a crisis Buffy.
Yep.
I love Buffy pulling up into the ceiling.
Right.
I love a woman with upper body strength. I always love it.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Always love it.
Very good. And of course, I think the big moment is no Spike. It's going to hurt a lot.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
All right. So Noelle, what is your favorite part?
My favorite part is Angel and Spike catching up over drinks.
Right.
With Xander in the hallway. They're that relationship is so different from every other relationship we've seen. Of course, Angel is playing a role there. I just love their sort of brotherly vampire relationship in that moment.
Yes.
And it's just, there's something hilarious about Xander just dangling there as a prop in Angel's scheme.
Yeah. It's very fun. And again, not terribly well thought out. I mean, it's fun in the moment, but like, what does Angel even think he's doing? Like, what is the point of going and confronting Spike? Like, what is that? I don't know. Anyway, but it was really, really fun.
Yeah.
It's
well, I
cute.
mean, what does Angel even think he's doing in this episode? Just
not much. Just showing up to say, oh, by the way, this vampire is really, really bad. And then sneaking out, like no details. Like we know at this point all the stuff that he knows about Spike. Now, granted, that's retconned at this moment. The people writing it didn't know all of that history because it had not yet been created or filled in. But with us knowing now what we know now, having seen all of Buffy and of Angel, Angel's reaction to Spike is going to be much more complicated than, he doesn't stop until everybody's dead. Like, and then he leaves and that's it. It's like, there's much more information you could really give us about Spike. The fact that he's a fucking goofball could be part of it.
Yeah.
But it's really fun. I mean, for me, I gotta say, my favorite part throughout the whole thing is just Spike. Everything Spike. That's
just all of Spike.
All of Spike. Every moment of Spike. Except maybe when he says women. I don't believe that. But everything else. All right, that's it for today. To join in the discussion on Twitter, follow me at Lani Diane Rich and Noelle at Noelle Aloud and use the hashtag StillPretty. You can also visit the Chipperish forums. Go to chipperish.com, click on forum, and join in the fun.
Or you can keep Chipperish Media going to the tune of $1 a month or more and gain access to the live chat in Discord, where you can hang out with me and Lani and all the Chipperish patrons who are going to have a little less ritual and a little more fun around here. Visit patreon.com/chipperish to find out more.
You can also show your support by giving Still Pretty a great review on Apple Podcasts, or by telling your friends about the show, or by being brave and resourceful and thinking of others in a crisis.
We're off next week for Chipperish staff development, but we will be back in 2 weeks with Inca Mummy Girl, the 4th episode of Season 2. Until then, who do you kill for fun around here?